My name is Rudy Maxa. I'm a travel journalist. Welcome to the 10th webcast. My guest is Robert Stevens. You see him in the corner of the screen here. He is the founder of Geek Squad. We're going to be talking to him in a moment about high tech and travel and how tech can help you in travel. My second guest is coming up. He's a very funny American who lives in Paris and wrote a book about marrying a French woman and having children in France and living there and being not the most sophisticated American. The book is called Monsieur Mediocre. His name is John Van Souten. A very funny guy. He'll be coming up at the half hour. Meanwhile, Robert Stevens is here. Robert started Geek Squad when he was a student at the University of Minnesota. He rode his bike around campus fixing people's computers. And what happened in a nutshell after that, Robert, because I want to get to our main topic, which is today and technology and travel.
Yeah, well, I started in Minneapolis, and it just happened that Best Buy was based there too. And so after about 6 or 7 years of doing it on my own, I dated Best Buy for a few years before we got married. And it still continues to be a good marriage. Geek Squad just turned 26 years old
Oh, my God.
last month. Yeah, it was 17 years since I acquired Best Buy, and it's been 8 years since I left Best Buy. So I stayed as long as I could to prevent them from screwing it up, which still, all big companies eventually screw these things up. But it's lasted a lot longer than I think anybody thought, including myself.
Well, that's because none of us know computers as well as the Geek Squad does, as evidenced by my doing this webcast and every week having something go wrong when I started up. You now live in Sonoma. And I know you're involved in starting up a couple other companies, but let's talk. I remember when I first met you here, I don't know, maybe 14, 15 years ago in St. Paul. We both lived here at the time. I still live here. Again, Robert is coming to us from his home in Sonoma, California. iPhone was relatively new, and you took my iPhone and showed me stuff I had no idea it could do. And you said, basically, that's nothing. Wait till you see what the future will bring. Have you been astounded at the future and what the future will bring? And I'm sure there's more coming, correct?
Oh, there's always more coming. I hope I never I hope I never take for granted all the amazing stuff we have at our fingertips. I mean, I remember in the early 90s thinking, one day we might have color printers, and now, of course, we've got inkjet printers are less than $100. The camera quality. One thing to keep in mind where we're at in 2020 is not even past our lifetimes. The mobile phone is the single most important device ever created, probably by humans, in terms of like a product. It really has replaced hundreds of other devices that we used to own. But there's not going to be something else that's going to replace that. This is it. People used to wonder, is Apple going to make a television? Even if they did, televisions, they'd sell maybe a couple 100 million a year. Almost everybody on the planet that could have internet has access to internet now. And so most of the innovations now will be less in hardware. Yes, the iPhones will get smaller and thinner, but they're not ever really going to get too much smaller than the human hand. So then the question is, where is all the innovation going to happen? It's going to happen inside the phone. All those features that I helped you notice, that's still a problem. They keep packing all this capability into the internet, into your laptop, into your television, in your car. But how do you access all that without reading the manual or having to even hire a Geek Squad? And the future really is like, we all make fun of how bad Siri is and Alexa that only gets half the questions right. So think ahead 5, 10 years where the computer not only can answer your question, but predicts your question and anticipates what you need before you need it. And if you remember Radar on the TV show MASH, right? As soon as Colonel Potter would say something, Radar would be standing there with the right answer. That's where your phone is going to go. And you can imagine how that'll impact travel and all sorts of other experiences.
Well, so you think there are too many software options out there, or too many app options out there now, or you think they just aren't collected in a way that is easy for those of us who aren't technologically minded? Is it just too difficult for us to use and find?
It's not about your technical competency. It's just a discovery problem. It's a search problem. That's why Google is still one of the most valuable companies in the world. If you can't find if there's billions of haystacks, you're not going to ever find the needle. So as a geek, I would never argue that we have too much technology. We need more and more, but it's going to begin to physically disappear. Now I can answer the phone on my watch. I can make phone calls on this. When I'm cooking, I can make her a verbal reminder instead of picking up my phone, which, by the way, that ends up doubling when you own a wearable watch. You end up picking up your phone half the time, and a third of your entire battery life is just lighting up the screen every time you look at it. So even using a watch can increase your battery life, which is a good tip for travel. But there's going to be more and more features. So how do we access them all? And that is, instead of you having to hunt in your settings menu for that thing, your phone is increasingly going to watch and learn your habits. It knows when you go to sleep. It knows when you wake up. It knows when you look up recipes for what to eat for dinner. It knows when you check this one thing 3 times or you're waiting for that package. So the computer can begin to program itself, like to warm up your house. You get stuck in traffic, it doesn't turn on the furnace until it knows you're at least 20 minutes out. So there's all sorts of ways when these things start talking to each other that we actually have to do less. And there'll be less buttons in your house. They'll just one day you might not even have a phone that you carry on you. You might just see it through some kind of visual display, maybe in a contact lens or a pair of glasses.
What
I
about
think it's safe to say in the next 5 years, Apple probably will make. I think they should call it the iPod, but spelling it EYE. But imagine a pair of glasses that has a display built in.
Well, we tried glasses at one point and they weren't popular. What was wrong
Yeah,
with them?
but you got to remember, you got to think about like the first phone. Look like a little horn and a thing that you held to your ear, right? And
It was
then we
huge.
show
Yeah, it was
kids
the
now
size of a
rotary
brick.
dial.
Right. Size
Yeah.
of a brick. Yeah.
So, and if you remember the cell phones from Wall Street, 1980s, ignore the first version, ignore the first of anything you see. You really have to think, remember your first iPhone to what it looks like now and to what
Hmm.
it does.
Hmm.
And that will come.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. Now, what about travelers and translation? There are some translation apps that you can have on your phone that will, if you say, I would like a hamburger, please, it'll play back in Japanese or whatever. Is that going to become much more smooth? Will we have to hold it up for somebody to hear it or not?
Yeah, currently Google's the leader, of course. If you don't have the Google Translate app, I recommend you get it because it does so much more than just speech translation. It does written. You can hold it over a menu, and in real time, it's called Google Lens. It will auto detect the language and show you that in your native language, and then allow you to speak. And there's also now conversation mode. So instead of having to listen and translate and read and speak back and translate, there's a thing called conversation mode now, where in real time it will listen to two parties talk and translate and auto detect the language in both directions.
That
Kind
exists
of like the
now?
Babelfish. It's built into Google Translate and it's a free app. So what does that mean? What you should expect in Translate, like where Google is, they're ahead. Where Apple is behind is Siri doesn't do full translation. And I think what's most important is offline translation. If it's really going to work, it needs to auto detect your language and it needs to work without an internet connection in a subway, in a taxi cab, in a tunnel. And Apple is, I just read last week, Apple's expected to announce in iOS 14 coming out this fall that they are going to offer offline language translation in a handful of languages to start. Google does, I think, over 100. But the Translate app is incredible. And they also have another one where you just hold the image, the search up. You can search by your camera, and if you hold it over a product, it will find that product for you to purchase online.
Right. I had heard about that. I did not know that that will be fabulous for travelers overseas to be able
Oh
to
yeah.
have a real dialogue. How far are we away from that?
Well, the Translate app it works on iPhone right now, and you can see on here it can detect handwriting. You can actually write with your hand. You can use camera, but there's this thing called conversation mode, and when you tap it, one person speaks, and then as you speak, it will automatically translate for you, and you can just keep talking.
Wow.
And I can just hold it up as I speak. And then if you want, it will speak it, you know. I don't know if you can hear that audio,
You
but
can hear it. It's Japanese. Yeah, I
yeah.
didn't know you could just speak it and it would
And
just.
if I want to change, so if I'm going to take what I just spoke and change it to Norwegian, I just tap Norwegian. It translated, you know, and now I'm just talking. And as I speak, it's going to convert it into Norwegian.
Oh my goodness, that is phenomenal. I didn't know. I didn't know you
Yeah,
could do that yet. I did
it's
not know.
free. You can download that right now on your Android or iPhone.
This is what I'm talking about. When I met Robert, he showed me something called Around Me. He said, "Look, it tells you the history of the church a block away. Here's this here. You find a restaurant." I was like, "What?" This was eye-opening to me. 15 years, 13, whatever, how many years it was. And uh, by the way,
Well, I did bring a few gadgets today to
go
show you if you want to get to. Now, first of all,
absolutely.
I'm wearing AirPods. Now, AirPods are great, and it's kind of amazing because they've been around for a couple of years, but I'm wearing the new AirPod Pros. And the difference between the Pros is these are full-on noise canceling. Um, and if you haven't experienced them and you travel, or even you commute for work, or even if you just work around the house, they're absolutely incredible because with one little pinch, I can turn this into noise cancellation mode. Right now, I'm talking, I can barely hear my own voice.
Wow.
So it's like Bose noise cancellation. And if I press
Mm-hmm.
and hold again, it's transparent mode. So now I can hear external noise and the sound in my earphones. This is it's so uncanny that you listen to people who put these on. They're great on the subway. They block out almost all noise. I have a really large tractor. I can listen to a podcast in these. I think they're fun for travel because one of my favorite things to do, especially if I'm traveling on business and I have an extra half day, I love to download a walking tour podcast of a city and just
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of wandering through. I've done this in London where I've retraced the steps of Benjamin Franklin, or Shakespeare's old London. And there's nothing more fun than walking through London and all of a sudden they stop you in a parking lot telling you that this is the original site of the Globe Theatre where Henry V was first performed. So yeah, that's
Okay.
one
The
other thing.
earbud pros. Okay, what else you got?
Well, I don't want to go all Apple on you, but if we think about what is the best travel, really these days, it's not about all the gear you can carry. It's about the gear you don't have to carry. And
Mm-hmm.
up until now, an iPad wasn't necessarily the perfect replacement for a laptop, but this is my new like perfect setup. So this is the brand new, and that's kind of expensive. It's $350 just for the keyboard. It's $1,000 just for the top of the line iPad. But this is the Apple iPod Pro with the Magic Keyboard. So this is their new um, keyboard that has an extra charging port here, but the iPad just pops off.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the Apple Pencil that you can get for it. So it easily comes off, but this is the new, this is the absolutely newest thing. It folds flat, it charges the iPad, but this allows you to carry smaller than just about any laptop. Um, and it's magnetic and it just snaps in place
Mm-hmm.
and it's very easy to use as you can see kind of
Right.
I'm hardly touching my laptop anymore when I do this. So if you have to travel, this is about the smallest package I think you can get. Um,
All right. Do you have one more thing
battery
before we
lasts all
say
day.
goodbye you want to show us or no? If you don't,
Well, you know the well, I don't carry a lot of technology other than that. I'll show you my oldest piece of technology that I travel with. This is a leaf press. And this is
yeah,
this is an old Victorian one
right.
from England. I think I got on eBay. You know, um, Technology is great, but also when I travel, I try and take souvenirs with me. I might press a flower, grab some hotel stationery. Keep some of those artifacts. And I always recommend a really good pen
The Geek
for
Squad guy.
travel.
The Geek Squad tells you to carry a very good pen.
One pen. This is my favorite one. This is out of two guys out of Austin, Texas. It's called their website is studioneat.com.
How
Now,
do you spell
who
Neek?
Neat, Neat,
Oh,
Studio Neat.
studioneek.com.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is called the Mark I pen. Now, what makes this pen so special? Could anybody reinvent the pen in 2020? Well, they have. It's a ceramic coated, beautiful, really satisfying click. This is
Yeah.
what they did. This is what they innovated. This is a copper tap, but they machine engineered this piece. It's metal, it'll last forever. The other thing they did is that this pen works with the famous Schmidt 8126 refill. So it works with over 20 common refills on Amazon. This pen is like $40, but this is like the last pen you'll ever need. But this
Okay.
metal thing here, instead of those cheap Bic plastic ones, is this one pen you buy. Travel with a good pen, pack it in your bag, write letters home, and you know, in a day and age of text messages and emails, nothing makes a bigger impression than a good piece of stationery.
Okay.
Which you know, as I've sent you letters.
You have sent me letters with old-fashioned stamps, and I've sent them back to you. Thank you, Robert, for joining us today. Robert Stephenson is the founder of Geek Squad. He eventually sold it and went on to his reward in Sonoma Valley to Best Buy, which now still has armies of Geek Squad folks everywhere. Robert, thanks so much for stopping in and giving us a glimpse of the future. I appreciate it.
Okay, next house call's on me. See you, Rudy.
Thanks, Robert. Bye-bye.
You're either shopping, you're cooking, you're cleaning. You're basically renting out a place with roommates you don't know, and everything is on the clock. It was a weird experience, but it had the kind of comical thing where you can't leave, and it's kind of what they call a huis clos. But it was just interesting that the fact that like everything was rationed down to the mozzarella, to the tomatoes. Nobody really wanted to eat that much because they were dieting. And there came like a choice of rooms at the beginning and it was first come, first serve. So the people that got there early.
That must be ugly. But you also said there was some requirement to perform at times.
Yes, that was the weird thing. And now I'm told this isn't all of French people to do this, but there was something called ateliers. And they were like, John, so what are you going to be doing this week for your atelier? And I didn't understand what that meant until I saw like a sheet, tic-tac, thumbtack to a corkboard saying, okay, well, Jerome will be doing the philosophy atelier and Michel will be doing the abdo fessier, which means crunch atelier, the physical. And so in these people, and we would embark on these kind of ateliers for about an hour, depending on the person's specialty.
And it was group participation, right? Everybody had.
And of course, and you can't back out. Exactly. There was always a running joke at the end is, "Où est John? Where is John? Well, he's supposed to be at the yoga atelier. Why isn't he here?"
What was your atelier when you had to do it? Was it about writing? Was it about stand-up comedy?
Yeah, it was kind of stand-up comedy, and then I realized in the south, south of Italy with French, it's not gonna work, But everybody gave me their 5 minutes, and we tried to workshop the 5 minutes, and then I disappeared again.
You tried to get them you taught them and had them to stand up and be funny.
Yeah, and try to stand up and be funny, and
never works.
It never works, especially in a different language. The whole thing is.
All right. What do you love about France? What might surprise us about what you like about France?
God, I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's a good question. I think the way we look at time in France, I feel like I've gotten used to that a lot more now. In terms of like dinners are very long, and I realize that there's a purpose to that. And when I come back to the States, I go to friends' places, friends' houses for dinner, and everything kind of wraps up about 10 o'clock, Oh, gotta go. It was great. I'm like, what? I thought we were just getting started. So this notion of time.
I'm surprised to hear that.
I don't know. I felt like my friend Paul-Henri told me this once. They even have a thing in France mid-dinner called the True Normand. Have you heard about this thing?
No.
It's called the Norman Hole. And what you do is you kind of mid-dinner, let's say after maybe the first plate, because there's a series of plates, obviously. Everybody takes a break and takes a shot of Calvados or whiskey to kind of get your stomach back and to kind of get your sea legs back. And then you're ready to kind of confront the next 6 dishes that are about to come.
Do you stay at the table for that?
You can stay, no, not really. You can kind of go to the kitchen. You go out on the balcony and smoke. It's almost like a tent. You go into another room and catch the score of a game. It's kind of just this kind of weird interlude that I found fascinating, and it would never fly in the States. I feel. I don't know. People just, you just move on to the next thing.
If you sit down to eat, you sit down to eat. You don't.
Yeah, we're eating the dinner.
Right.
Yeah.
And get up and wander.
Yeah. Where are you going, John?
Might that be at a casual dinner at a couple's house, or is that a formal dinner with 8 or 10 or more people?
It's kind of both. It's kind of both. That's what I loved about it. And also the starting times, I realized that dinners were very different. They're kind of always, as the French call, flou. You never know really what time they start. And you'll ask and you'll be like, okay, 8:30, should we be there? Like, yeah, whatever you want, John, 8:30, 9. And, it's funny when we have dinners and American friends come over and you tell them 8, 7:59, bang, the buzzer's going.
Certainly here in Minnesota and in Italy, if you showed up at the time they told you to show up, your hostess is probably in the shower still.
Yes, and Anais has countlessly been in the shower, and she always yells down, "Who are these rude people that show up at 8 when we tell them 8? How dare they show up on time?"
Has your French wife ever expressed exasperation with you being American in certain ways?
Oh God, yeah. She keeps always having to bail me out with all of the commerçants, the food people when I go shopping, because I always over order and I always come back with like maybe 2 pounds of clams, and she's like, "Why did you buy so much?" And I keep telling her, well, I didn't have the heart to say no. He just kept loading them in. And so she's taken me back to these commerçants sometimes. She takes me back almost like a child. I'm behind her.
Look what my little bad boy did.
Yeah. And she's like, why did you give him 2 pounds of clams? He's little. He can't eat all that.
He doesn't know any better.
And they're like, but madame, I don't know. And then she'll take me to the tailor and say, why did you press his jeans? He doesn't want his jeans pressed. Same thing. I almost feel like I have a school note, to tape to my chest, and my mother's dragging me around.
I remember the first time, I guess, on the left bank, the streets are narrow there in the old quarter, and there are people selling vegetables and fruit, and I remember the first time I picked up a peach to examine it and had my hand slapped away, swatted away. And I learned,
yes,
you don't touch the merch.
You do not touch the merch. No, they give you like these little baskets sometimes, and like he'll put it in the basket for you.
Well, you bought it then, right?
Right. Yeah.
You can't bring it up, smell it, sort of feel if it's firm or ripe yet or not.
Oh, no. I'm always too terrified to even say no, just and with the cheese, the cheese, when they're cutting the cheese, they'll give you, okay, this big, and you're like, yeah, that's fine.
You like wine?
I love wine, of course.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, there's a big movement now, which I think we've taken from the Americans, is the natural wine. There's a big natural
wine? The biodynamic.
Sorry?
The biodynamic
yes.
one. Right.
Yeah. And that's taken on a big flair here. And it's funny watching French argue about it, because you'll have the classic people that love their Bordeaux's and love their Burgundies. And then, these kind of young rebels who are kind of like, what you've had before is bullshit, and I'm just kind of in the middle going, they're both great,
Right. Well, my guest, if you just tuned in and some people have just joined us, is named John. His last name is spelled Southen, but I think you pronounce it Sothen. Is that right?
Sothen.
Okay.
Yeah.
John Van Sothen. His book came out last May called Monsieur Mediocre, but it's coming out in paperback in August, and I thought it was time to have him back on. It is a very amusing and perceptive account of living in France, and I like to give it. I buy it for friends who say, someday I'm going to live in France. I really want to live in France. I say, well, maybe you ought to read Monsieur Mediocre first and see how he fared, because he's been stumbling through it for more than a decade so far, near as I can tell. You think you're 90% French yet?
Maybe about 80. I think I tell people I speak French like Arnold Schwarzenegger speaks English. You understand everything I say, but nobody thinks I'm French. Yeah, I'm not a native.
Do you find yourself, when you come back to America to visit friends or family, do you find yourself doing French things and get some puzzled stares?
Yes, sometimes. I remember we went to, well, that was more of Anais when we went to dinner one time and she
Anais
saw these.
is your wife. Anais is your wife.
Anais is my wife. Yeah, sorry. And I remember she was like, why are there were people playing putt-putt golf in front of the restaurant? It was we were on vacation in North Carolina. And she was like, why do people golf before dinner? What are they doing? And I'm like, no, they've already eaten, honey. You know, they're done. They ate at 5:30.
He raises the question of why they golf after dinner.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, so I think eating late has always been kind of one thing that my friends like remark on, like, oh, really? We're going to eat at 8 with you, John, or 9 o'clock? Also, I've become like this, I've started this jihad against air conditioning. And every time I go back to the States, I feel like everything is so cold.
Yes,
and I'm wearing sweaters and it's always funny. I tell my friends I'm wearing sweaters in August in America and then a t-shirt in December because the heat is too high.
When you come home, where do you come home to?
Well, I was born in Washington, D.C. And part of the book is my story of growing up in D.C. My dad was a correspondent journalist and my mother was a painter. And I grew up in D.C. and then I lived a long time in New York where I met my wife.
Where did you go to college?
I went to college in the Midwest at University of Wisconsin, Madison.
Right next door to where I am in Minnesota. And where did you go to high school in Washington?
I went to St. Albans High School, which is kind of an all-boys private school right up by the National Cathedral. Al Gore went there. My
son went there. He graduated.
Oh, really? Oh,
yes.
Wow. A bulldog.
My ex-wife and I have check stubs to prove it, by the way.
Yes. And the blood and toil that went to pay those check stubs too.
Oh man, as a journalist, you're not kidding. Kidding.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
That's
all right.
Great.
So you moved to Paris, and well, first of all, if there's someone in the audience who is dreaming of moving to Paris, what would you advise them now? Have real estate prices gone down since both not just COVID-19 but also the riots and the yellow shirt, blah blah blah.
Right.
What would you say to somebody who said, I really want to come live in Paris, maybe forever, maybe for a year?
Right. I'm not sure about the real estate thing. I think the thing is that Paris is kind of a locked-in market. There isn't like, unlike New York or some of these other big cities, a lot of it is kind of controlled by the city. You won't just have a giant skyscraper come on the market and all of a sudden there's 400 new apartments available. So that has kind of kept the real estate market kind of stable. If I was coming for the first time, I think I would do maybe the Right Bank where I live. I live in the 10th arrondissement, mm-hmm. which is still kind of affordable. I think when you get into the inner circle of Paris, if people don't know, there's 20 arrondissements in Paris, and they kind of unravel like a snail shell. And so the first arrondissement will be almost where Notre Dame is, and then the second will go, and it kind of works out like that. And the 10th is kind of the northeast part of the city. It's near Gare du Nord, which is the train station that takes everybody to London. And it's a great mix of, there's about 180 nationalities. It's one of the most diverse, I think it is the most diverse part of Paris and maybe the most diverse part of Europe. And it's still affordable. And you have a variety of cuisines. You have the Canal Saint-Martin that goes up, and you get to live near me, which,
Well, I know from my daughter's experience that buying a piece of property in France is very complicated. It involves lawyers, and I mean, not that it doesn't in the States, but it's not quite as efficient. Is renting easier?
I think maybe at the beginning, I think I probably would rent. You could even do an Airbnb for a bit, and then but renting also is not easy because often the French landlords ask for your salary. They want to see pay stubs. They want to see a lot of my friends say, yeah, I bought the apartment because I never could have rented.
Really?
Yeah, like I never would have qualified as a tenant, so I just bought it. But that said, I think Paris is changing a bit. I think Airbnb has changed that a lot, and landlords are less stringent. But the thing is, landlords are very strict because it's very difficult to throw somebody out if they're not paying rent.
No. They vet you fairly thoroughly.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
What else did I know before I moved to France?
Well, let's try to get your papers in order. I think I don't know if I was lucky enough because I married Anais when I got there, and I was able to qualify as kind of a marié, and then also we had a child soon after, so I was a father of a French child, which meant they greased the wheels for me to get a job fast. You know, they didn't want another deadbeat. You know. But I know that's difficult if you're not marrying somebody to have papers. And usually you're kind of limited to like a 3-month visa or tourist visa. Right. Yeah, but I would stay within the city limits. I don't think I would go out into the suburbs. I think that would just be an added thing on your plate that kind of makes things difficult, you know?
Okay, enlighten us on 2 cliches. One,
yes,
Parisians are rude, and second, Paris it just isn't what it used to be. Paris, I hear that all the time.
Really, yeah. Interesting. Parisians are not rude. I've never found them rude. I found them realists. You know, I think if a guy is in Cleveland, he's pretty sure that he's going to get a better Burgundy than like an American wine. That doesn't make him a snob that he just wants to get the Burgundy. I think it just makes him like, a realist. They're very proud. I think sometimes Americans get to this point where if we're not getting our asses kissed and America is so great, we automatically assume the person's rude. No, I think he's just very proud of his own nation and his culture. And
I found French people on the street to be very helpful for direct. I've only had one person who really embarrassed in my life, and I've been there a lot.
Yeah, sure. I think if you make the effort, they always just want to see you make a little effort. I see sometimes people at duty free or something just immediately launching into English when they're buying something, to take home with them. Where can I find the Tobler one? And then the person's just like, can't you just say, excusez-moi? Can't you just, so I think if you make that first kind of overture, that whole kind of facade of the French stern looking man kind of crumbles. And, what about puppies after that?
All right. What about, Paris just isn't the same, no reason to go back. It's just not the same.
Yeah, I think that's lame. Because I think when I compare it to my former city of New York, it's when I go back to New York that I feel like New York really isn't the same, because I feel like New York has really become a wealthy city and really almost vanilla, and almost like there's a Chase Bank on every corner or a CVS. And going back to that real estate thing, I think the one thing about Paris that is kind of unique still in these big cities is that they haven't been overrun by chains, and that these businesses still endure, and you still have the same boulangerie on your street that's been there for 150 years. And I think that counts after a while. I think the fabric of these neighborhoods is the same that it's been for 100 years, and perhaps, yes, maybe they don't have the hippest new burger place, but you're not going there for that, are you? I mean, if you are, that's sad.
I always say to people, nothing's ever the way it used to be.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. Cleveland's not the way it used to be. So
no. Okay.
Can you feature yourself ever moving back to America permanently?
God, it's fascinating because I'm getting more into this idea of this weird thing of feeling like a foreigner when you go back to America, and I think I want to explore that in my next book. But I don't think so.
Kids going to school in America for college or university?
Well, my daughter, it's funny you say that. My daughter is going to the University of Miami next year. She just got in, but now because of the coronavirus, she's taking a gap year. She was like, Dad, I don't really want to go yet.
We really are. I mean, your brother Americans over here, we really have sort of become the don't invite ems of the world, aren't we?
Yeah, but I was happier about it. I'll critique America a lot, but I do think the university system is something very unique in America that still kind of exists, that you don't have in France, for example, that you don't have to choose a major immediately, that you can take a variety of classes. that's huge. I mean, and it's not like that everywhere. In France, it's weird. You have to choose between whether you're good in literature and science in ninth grade. And then after that, you kind of take a different curriculum than your fellow classmates. So, I almost think the French school system is kind of like the Japanese school system in a weird way, of like this, making these hard choices early on. And then you have the baccalaureate when you're 18, and that's almost like whether you go to college or not. So, even though we're happy to critique the American system for being expensive and everything for that, and that is true, there is some fundamental parts that I still like,
Do your kids have to take batteries and batteries of tests?
Yeah, all the time. And, they're called controls.
Ooh.
And it's not just like their aptitude tests, and there's baccalaureates, and then there's, and everybody's trying to find your niche. What are you good at? Instead of just being a wide variety person that you might be good at a lot of different things.
So somebody might be funneled into being an auto mechanic by the 10th grade, right?
Yeah, no, and if you don't have the grades, then tough luck, bud. But I talked to a friend who works in business, and he's like, that's the problem also with a lot of the French higher ups, is that they all come from engineering. Well, most of them come from engineering, and to have an engineering background is great for a lot of things, but sometimes you become too myopic on certain things. And a lot of the reasons a lot of these French companies who were ahead of the game early on didn't kind of come through was because they weren't able to see the bigger picture, or maybe just didn't come from different backgrounds, which might have helped, We
have a question before we say goodbye to you from Ginger.
Yeah.
What about going to France to search down your Dubois family? Is it easy to find, looking for genealogy documents easy to find in France? I think maybe John's screen might have frozen there for a moment. I don't know this technology. What did Robert Stevens say, the Geek Squad guy? He said, Are you there? Are you there, John? Come back, John. Oh, you know what? We've come to the end. Maybe we've come to the end of our webcast. If so, I will say goodbye and thank John for being a guest, and thank you for tuning in. We'll do it again next week.